Leviticus 25, the Sabbatic year and year of Jubilee. The Lord spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, When you come into the land which I am giving you, and the land shall give a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years you shall sow your field, and for 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather in its crops. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall not sow seed in your field, nor prune your vineyard. Whatever reseeds itself, uncultivated in your harvest, you shall not reap, nor shall you gather the crops from your uncultured vine. It shall be a year of sabbatical rest for your land. And all of you shall have for food whatever the untilled land produces during the Sabbath year, yourself and your male and your female slaves, your hired servant and your foreigners who reside among you. Even your domestic animals and the wild animals that are in your land shall have all its crops to eat. The year of Jubilee. You also to count off 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years, that you have the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years, namely 49 years. Then you shall sound the ram's horn everywhere on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the day of atonement you shall sound the trumpet throughout your land. You shall consecrate the 50th year and proclaim freedom for the slaves throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee, a year of remission for you. And each of you shall return to his own ancestral property that was sold to another because of poverty. And each of you shall return to his family from which he was separated by bondage. That 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. You shall not sow, nor reap which reseeds itself, nor gather the grapes of the uncultivated vines. For it is the Jubilee, it shall be holy to you, and you shall eat its crops out of the field. In this year of Jubilee, each of you shall return to his own ancestral property. If you sell anything to your friend or buy from any field, you shall not wrong one another. According to the number of years after Jubilee you shall buy from your friend, and he is to sell to you according to the number of years of crops which may be harvested before you must restore the property to him. If the years until the next Jubilee are many, you shall increase the price, but if the years remaining are few, you shall reduce the price because of the number of crops that he is selling to you. You shall not wrong another, but you shall fear your God with profound reverence, for I am the Lord your God. Therefore you should carry out my statutes and keep my ordinances and do them so that you may live securely on the land. Then the land will yield its produce so that you can eat your fill and live securely on it. And if you say, what are we going to eat in the 7th year if we do not sow crops or gather in the crops? Then, this is my answer, I will order my special blessing for you in the 6th year so that it will produce sufficient crops for 3 years. When you're sowing the 8th year, you can still eat old things from the crops, eating the old until the 9th year when its crop comes in. I was thinking that as they were talking about not sowing, like in a couple chapters back, and I was like, what would they eat? How would we do that nowadays? But it said that God provided extra and abundance. And I think of that in our lives now. Like, our economy is bad right now, right? We get this, we get those things. But it's going to, like, just like everything, it's a cycle. Everything is a cycle. So, like, it's going to get good again. I know it might take some time, but when it gets good, that's the time to save for things. That's the time to put aside for things, because it will again break down. It will again go down. So in those lean times, you can have saved from those good times to use for those times. I think that's a good lesson for today. So a good lesson for reading this here. I love this. The year of Jubilee, that is a year of liberty and restoration. That is a year that you just were excited to look forward to because your debts were erased. If you were a slave, you got to return to your family. It's like a year of celebration. It's like, and people got a fresh start. It's what the Lord wants for us. And that was every 50 years. Like, how awesome. Wouldn't it be great to have a fresh start? Yeah, you get a fresh start in the Lord. That's a good thing. But all the physical things were a fresh start in life. That's a great, great thing. Okay, the law of redemption. The land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine. You are only foreigners and temporary residents with me. So in all the country that you possess, you are to provide for the redemption of the land in the year of Jubilee. If a fellow countryman of yours becomes so poor he has to sell some of his property, then his nearest relative is to come and buy back, redeem what his relative has sold. Or in a case of a man that has no relative to redeem his property, but has become prosperous and has enough to buy it back, he shall calculate the years since its sale and refund the balance to the man to which he sold it, and so return to his ancestral property. But if he is unable to redeem it, then what he has sold shall remain in the hands of the purchaser until the year of Jubilee. But at the year of Jubilee it shall revert and may be returned to his property. If a man sells a house in a walled city, then his right of redemption remains valid for a full year after its sale. His right of redemption lasts a full year. But if it's not redeemed for him within a full year, then the house that is in the walled city passes permanently and irrevocably to the purchaser throughout his generations. It does not revert back in the year of Jubilee. The houses of the villages that have no surrounding walls, however, shall be considered as open field. They may be redeemed and revert in the year of Jubilee. As for the cities of the Levites have a permanent right of redemption for the houses in the cities which they possess. Therefore, what is purchased from the Levites may be redeemed by a Levite, and the house that was sold in the city they possess reverts in the year of Jubilee. For the house of the Levite cities are their ancestral properties among the Israelites, but if the pasture lands of their city may not be sold, for it is their permanent possession. Isn't that a great thing? The year of Jubilee, like everyone would look forward to the year of Jubilee. Family was coming back. The land that was taken was going to be restored. Your debts were going to be erased. That was a year of redemption and restoration. That's a beautiful thing. It says, of poor countrymen. Now, if your fellow countryman becomes poor and his hand falters with you, that is, he has trouble repaying you for something, then you are to help and sustain him with courtesy and consideration, like you would a stranger or a temporary resident without property, so that he may live among you. Do not charge him a huge interest amount, but fear your God with profound reverence, so your countrymen may continue to live among you. You should not give him your money at interest, nor your food at a profit, because I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan to be your God. If your fellow countryman becomes so poor in his dealings with you that he sells himself to you as payment for a debt, you shall not let him do the work of a slave who is ineligible for redemption. But he is to be with you as a hired man. As if he were a temporary resident, he shall serve with you until the year of Jubilee. And then he shall leave you, he and his children with him, and he shall go back to his own family and return to the property of his fathers. For the Israelites are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt, and they shall not be sold in a slave sale. You shall not rule over him with harshness, but you are to fear your God with profound reverence. And as for your male and female slaves whom you may have, you may acquire male and female slaves from the pagan nations that are among you. Moreover, from the children of the strangers who live as aliens among you, from them you may buy slaves, and from their families who are with you, whom they have produced in your land, they may become your possessions. You may even bequeath them as an inheritance to your children after you, to receive it as a possession. You can use them as permanent slaves, but in respect to your fellow countrymen, the children of Israel, you shall not rule over one another with harshness, severity, or oppression. Of redeeming a poor man. Now, if the financial means of a stranger or temporary resident among you becomes sufficient, and your fellow countryman becomes poor in comparison to him, and sells himself to the stranger who is living among you, to your descendants of the stranger's family, then after he is sold, he shall have the right of redemption of his relatives may redeem him. Either his uncle or his uncle's sons may redeem him, or one of the blood relatives from his family may redeem him. Or if he prospers, he may redeem himself. Then he or his redeemer shall calculate with his purchase from the years when he sold himself to the purchaser to the year of Jubilee, and the original price of his sale shall be adjusted according to the number of years. The time he was with his owner shall be considered as that of a hired man. If there are still many years before the year of Jubilee, in proportion to them he must refund to the purchaser part of the price of his sale. And if only a few years remain until the year of Jubilee, he shall calculate with him. He is to refund the proportionate amount for his release. Like a man hired year by year, he shall deal with him. He shall not rule over him with harshness in your sight. Even if he is not redeemed during those years, and under those provisions, then he shall go free in the year of Jubilee. He and his children with him. The year of Jubilee. For the children of Israel are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Yes, he is. This is your daily Bible chapter reading God's Word Monday through Friday. See you tomorrow.